Hello, this is Mr. Kent of MrKent.com. And there's going to be a lot of people who don't care to watch this video, and that's fine with me. There might be a few, and I mean a very few, who are interested in watching this video and the associated links that I put in down in the description. But it's basically a history of the RC flying that I have done in my lifetime. So if you're interested in listening to and watching the videos that are connected with this, hang in there. Otherwise, don't waste your time. It won't hurt my feelings a bit. First of all, let me begin that I've always been interested in flying in just in general. My dad worked for United Airlines all the time I was growing up. He worked for him for about 40 years, and I was at airports, different airports, a lot of times, and he even worked on small planes on their radios and so forth. I remember going to the airport with him and watching the little planes fly in and out. In fact, that's where I got my first airplane ride. So that got me interested in airplanes, I think. And my little brother, who's bigger than me now, and better than me, my little brother and I grew up in Washington State, flying control line planes together, and I kept doing that until, well, into the 60s when I started college. And we would build our own planes and put those little 049 thimble drone engines on them, and with a control line, and spin around in circles flying our planes. And then in college I kind of lost interest in flying RC planes, or not RC, but flying little airplanes, model planes. And I didn't do much for many years, and part of the reason is because in 1986, from 1986 to 2005, I owned a couple of planes, that full-size airplanes, and that kind of makes flying RC planes is not as much interesting, and I had a lot of fun flying full-size planes. But anyway, I finally got rid of my full-size plane in 2005, but around 2003 or so, my son Bruce, who was married and had kids, he and I bought a Duraplane, almost ready to fly, trainer kit. Now, if you can look those up on the internet, they don't sell them anymore, but they were a kit that came with a section of downspout drain pipe and aluminum channel and foam wings. They had a little larger engine than the 049 on them, and so that was that got me back into flying RC planes for a while. And the only problem is I was so out of practice, it seemed like they went too fast for me. And I finally got tired of tearing the engine apart and cleaning the dirt out and putting it back together so I could fly again. And if you crashed them, you could fix them easy. That was another nice thing about it. But I ended up pretty much just watching my son fly his plane, his RC planes after that. Around 2004, when I was on vacation on the Oregon coast, I got up one morning, came out of the camper, and I heard this funny sound as a little electric motor flying around in the sky right next to our camper. We were right on the beach, and it was a calm morning. And this guy had this little white foam airplane with a motor on it. It was an RC plane, and he was flying it around, and it was fun to watch. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and find where to get one of those. And I found one. It was called a little Beaver. And this was before the days when brushless motors were affordable. And so this little Beaver had real thin plastic wheels with spokes on them to keep the weight down. And the spokes would break, and so I had to finally come up with different wheels and everything, but they broke easily. And I flew that off and on for, a year or so. And then finally I crashed it and bent the propeller shaft, and then everything went on the shelf and I kind of lost interest again. Around May of 2015, my family gave me a GoPro camera for Father's Day. A GoPro camera, if you don't know, is an action camera for guys that are on bicycles and jumping off of ledges and things like that. But they gave me one of those for Father's Day. And so I did a lot of videotaping of clouds, time-lapse photos of clouds and time-lapse photos of buildings under construction, and I did all kinds of stuff like that. But I was in my 70s, and an action camera is kind of, well, I just couldn't find enough uses for it. And so then I decided maybe I could mount it on a model airplane. And so I asked my son, around September of 2015, I asked him if he could find me an RC plane that could carry my GoPro camera. And so he did, and he found what's called the Apprentice, and so that's when I got my Apprentice, and it's a 5-foot wingspan. It'll easily carry a GoPro camera. And so he took off and flew it with the camera on it. I got a video of that and everything, but I had to learn to fly all over again before I dared flying with a camera attached to the plane. So I've got some experience. I got some experience flying that, and then finally hooked up the camera to it and made my first flight. And one thing about that big plane was I had a barn that I had to watch out for as I came around on the west side of the little field that I had right by my house. And so I almost hit that barn. In fact, I did hit the barn one time. But in the video that's connected with this explanation, I just came real close to the weather vane on the top. But that was my first GoPro flight with an airplane. Well, it wasn't FPV, but it was fun flying. I got the video to look at. I decided I needed something slower, and within a month or so of that first flight, I decided to learn how to fly a drone. So I ordered a Blade Nano, and they still sell them, and it's a very, very easy drone to learn from. Of course, it's not easy when you first take off, but that's where I learned to fly drones. And it doesn't have any GPS on it, but it did have what's called safe mode. And safe mode keeps it level unless you're turning or anything like that. It'll stay level, so it doesn't want to go sideways on you and all kinds of stuff. But I didn't fly it outside at first. I had to learn to fly inside, and I kept running into things in the house. And so my wife, she asked me if I would go fly it out in my shop. I had a nice shop, so I took it out there. And the video that's associated with that, there's actually two videos, but anyway, that was me flying it in the shop and learning how to do figure eights and so forth. And so that was my first drone, was a Blade Nano. And then it wasn't long after I got that, because that you can learn pretty fast with that. In I think it was September of 2015 again. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I looked around and I found a used Phantom 1. Now, they didn't call them Phantom 1s back then. They called them Phantoms because it was it was the first generation. I got a used one for $450, and it used 2200 milliamp LiPo batteries. Actually, it just had one battery. It came with one battery, and a good battery, you could fly for at least 6 minutes. And after 6 minutes, you better have it close, because that thing automatically started landing no matter where it was. There was no such thing as return home, although it was GPS, and it was it was very stable. And so I ended up buying a twin battery kit, or dual battery kit, I guess they call it. And that way I could carry two batteries, and on the outside, instead of sticking battery to the inside of the fuselage, I could fly with two batteries, and that extended my flight to about 9 minutes guaranteed. And so that worked out pretty well, and I could get some videos of my flights. And then I bought an FPV pack, and I've got a video on that, on how I set everything up for that. And I was actually able to make my first FPV video flight. In the fall of 2016, my family, we watched the grandkids, and they decided to move to Arizona. So we followed them down to Arizona, and I moved from a 1 acre lot with a lot of trees on it, but I was right next to a 40-acre lot where I could fly everything I wanted. And so we moved down to Arizona, and I live in a HOA on a postage stamp compared to where I used to live. And with the houses all circled around us, there's a lot of RF noise. Now remember, I don't know if I mentioned, but I've been an amateur radio operator since 1968. And I brought all my equipment, and I had special antennas I had made, and you can see those. I'll put a link to those. Those are on QRZ.com. under WA7LRD. But if you know anything about antennas and so forth like that, I had lots of room, and I could put up any kind of antenna I wanted up in Washington. But when I got to Arizona, I was limited, especially with the HOA, and there was a lot of RF noise, and so I kind of lost interest in ham radio, because an S9 noise level is terrible, and if you know anything about radio. So I decided, okay, I'll get back into flying, and flying drones. And my Phantom, if I wanted to fly it, I pretty much had to go find a park somewhere. And I wanted to fly FPV, and so I found a Blade Glimpse. And Blade Glimpse had a little camera on it, and so I could fly around in the backyard or in the house. And it was nice. You know, you could actually fly FPV looking at your phone, and I got a video of that and everything. So I did that for a little while, and it kind of satisfied my curiosities. Then I decided I would try a different drone. It was for $49, a Cheerson CX 10WD, and it was real small. I mean, it was it was real small, and I didn't fly it outside because you couldn't see it when it got very far away from you. But in the house, it was very stable, and it was kind of fun to fly, but it was breakable. And it wasn't until after I crashed it the last time that I looked at the instructions, which said don't fly this thing any higher than 3 feet off the ground, because when you would run into a wall, if you were like 7 or 8 feet off the floor, it fell really hard on the floor, and of course it didn't do it any good. So that wasn't a very good experience. Finally, in November of 2016, I sold all of my ham radio gear, which I had kept for years, and I had over $2,000, way over $2,000 worth of ham gear, and I sold it for $600 to buy a Bebop 2 FPV kit. And then I took it out and flew it, and it was great. Very stable, made good videos, and I haven't decided I dislike that drone at all. I'm still flying it. Actually, when the power model came out, I bought the power model and gave the standard model to my little brother, who's bigger than me, and I've been flying the power model now, and kind of like that's the story that I'm sticking to for the rest of my life. I've had a lot of fun flying, and my Bebop 2 is very pleasant to fly, and I'm very thankful for it. And I want to thank you. If you listened all the way through this video, I want to thank you. And you know, all of the videos, drones that I've talked about, I have most of them, I have videos and links to them in the descriptions. And if you have nothing else to do, you can watch those links. So thank you for listening, and God bless.